So I'm so thrilled to have Paul Hardy with us today. And Paul is an internationally renowned fashion designer, and he's clothed the likes of Sarah McLachlan, Paul Brandt, Bette Midler, Carrie Fisher, and Diane Kruger. Truly, Paul's been an inspiration in my life, whether he knows it or not. Looking through his Instagram and in his sites, I get fired up by his creativity and also by his depth of character, because I know Paul quite well. So Paul, what is creativity to you, and how do you find that you get the creative inspiration?
Oh, gee. Well, I'll start with the latter part because I have to think about the first part. But I would say that, most of my creative endeavors usually are inspired by a variety of things, really. It comes from, watching a movie or having read a book or, even a conversation. My first 4 collections that I designed were all inspired by biblical sermons I had heard. So so it just really, it's been varied throughout. And how would I define creativity? I guess being a spiritual person, I sort of view God as the author of creativity, and he's transcending through us, whether we realize it or not. So essentially, we're just emitting something greater than ourselves through, innate or honed abilities. Is that?
Yeah. And so that leads me to the next question, Paul, is do you find you get creativity from the outside in or inside out? And discuss that, perhaps that dynamic.
I think it comes, it's sort of, it works in tandem with one another. Like I might see something. So for example, this just came to me. I went and saw an exhibition at the Louis Vuitton Foundation in Paris. It was an art exhibition that had never, it was an impressionist collection that had never been outside of Russia. And as I was wandering through the different galleries, there were just certain color combinations that were jumping out at me within the different works, and I was like writing them down. And then as it turned out, I happened to be in Paris for the fabric trade shows. And then when I went to the fabric trade shows, because we work a year in advance, all the colors that I had been seeing in the paintings were things that I was picking up on at the fabric trade shows. And so there was this there's like a synergy that happens, I think, universally, which is why I said something's like transcending, because there's just, these series of coincidences. And then I internalized all that. And I think internally is how I generate the narrative for my collections, because I do a lot of like, internal pondering, I guess, of how not just from a visual perspective, but as you people who are watching this may not know, but everything that I do from a design perspective always is quite intentional, and there's a meaning and a reason behind the color choices or the fabric choices, or how things are curated together. And so a lot of that I process mentally and internally, and I let it sort of germinate so that I just intuitively feel like it's right or wrong,
And what role would you say self-awareness has played in your creative process?
Well, I'm reminded of this, um, my third collection that I designed. And I remember a fashion editor coming up to me after the runway show, and they said, "Oh, I finally get what you're doing." And I said, "Oh, please tell me, because I don't know." So I'm not sure how self-aware I was at the time, but she said to me, "You're branding a social concept as opposed to a visible brand." And I said, "How so?" Because I wasn't necessarily cognizant to it at the time. And she said, "I know from the moment of learning about your inspiration to the invitation to the program to the show itself, it's all pieces of a puzzle that are being put together, that at the end of it, I feel like I'm going to be challenged by an idea that I have the responsibility as to whether or not I'm going to act upon what I've learned." And she said, "I've never seen that being done before." And I wasn't self-aware that that's what I was doing. And so I guess the interesting shift that happened in that conversation is, because she had pointed it out to me, I became a lot more conscious and intentional in my work. And, I've never really considered, like, is that a good thing or a bad thing, because before I was doing it without necessarily being conscious of it, and maybe that was better. But I do find I can be a lot more pointed in the design work by being more conscious that way. So yeah, so it's been an evolution, I guess.
And you're a business owner, so how has your creativity, and you're a fantastic entrepreneur, so how has your creativity impacted your business and the way you organize your thinking around your work? And I know recently you're involved in not only fashion design, but you've been doing a lot of home and cottage design as well. And I'd love your insights in
Yeah.
terms of what's inspired you to grow your business, expand your business, and maybe speak about the last year and a half, because COVID's been a rather wild ride.
Yeah. Well, I always had it set in my mind since like grade 6 that I was going to be a fashion designer, and have any job that I had somehow related to the clothing industry, whether it was working in alterations or costume design or what have you. And I started my business, and it was going quite successfully. And then the market crash of 2008 happened. And I thought, well, I'm going to be done for. And I cut all of I come from 4 generations of bankers and accountants, so there is a little bit of a left brain side to me. And I, operated very narrow to the bone, and reduced all of my operating expenses and managed to, weather that. But at that time, very unexpectedly, one of my clients had asked me to do the interiors of her home because she liked the aesthetic of my design studio so much. And I had never done it before, but the foundations of design, proportion, balance, color theory are all the same. And so I thought, well, I'm happy to take a stab at it. And so I did it. They were very happy with it. They said that I was able to execute what they had wanted without them having to articulate it, which I guess in that respect. I think I do have a certain intuitiveness with my clients, regardless of the medium I'm working in, to be able to translate the vision that they actually are hoping for. But as a result of that experience, it ended up getting featured in a magazine, and then just by word of mouth, I added this other facet of interiors to my business. And so I think that experience from 2008 really kind of prepared me for this pandemic, in the sense that the economic downturn really didn't rattle me. It reminded me so much of 2008 in a way. But it added a different component, in the sense that I remember when lockdown happened, I had just come back from a trip, and the next day everything had locked down. And I woke up in the morning and I thought, nobody needs to get dressed anymore. I was like, oh my God, I'm irrelevant. And I thought, wow, that is really, like, it was psychologically, like, just it took a minute to kind of process, because it was just this very weird idea that all of a sudden you could wake up one day and what you do in your life, which isn't how I define myself, but what I do on a daily basis, was no longer needed. Seemed like I was sort of like, wow, I'm actually a profession that could go away. So, in a different sense than medicine, for example, right? So, but as it happens, because people were locked down, I had a lot of staple basics of knitwear and leggings, and these things that novelty tops and stuff that all looked great on Zoom and were suitable for people lounging at home. And so I was glad I had that inventory. There was some anxiety, in the sense that I had a lot of specialty fabrics that were just sitting there. So it was a lot of dead, well, at the time, dormant stock that was challenging to have to, figure out what to do with. But as a total unexpected thing, although I should have envisioned it, is that because everyone was locked in their houses, they started focusing on their houses. And I just started getting these random requests to do interior projects that I had not had lined up, that, people had been seeing stuff I had been designing on Instagram and so forth. And so there was a revenue shift in my business. And miraculously, I'm happy to report that I still made a profit last year, which, was a miracle in itself. It was just, fashion took a nosedive, and interiors took an upswing. And so, I have this motto, don't push a rock up a hill, and so I just sort of thought, I need to kind of go with the flow of the river. And right now, that had been the focal point. So, we tried to do like online and virtual shows and that sort of thing with fashion. But I had to make a conscious decision that, at least for the next year anyway, that was not going to be a main focal point of my business. And so now I'm working on, I think it's 6 or 7 projects for interiors at the moment, and some of them will last a couple years. So it was really nice to know that there was a bit of a security from that perspective.
I love that whole comment on don't push a rock up a hill. Like
Mm,
that when it's not, you know, when it's too hard, just
yeah,
pay attention to other things, right?
totally. And I think you know, the thing that I have a lot of uncertainty about from the fashion perspective is you know, a lot of people have been saying, oh, you know, it's going to come back like the roaring 20s. And yeah, I don't want to be cynical, but I'm like, yeah. And what happened after the roaring 20s? It was the depression of the 30s. So let's not like get ahead of ourselves here, you know? I, um, I think it would be a bittersweet thing. Like, yes, I would love for the economy to bounce back in that way. But at the same time, I feel like a lot of people have been reevaluating the priorities of their lives over this past year and seeing a lot of things that they can do without, seeing the things that are fundamentally important to them. And it makes me wonder if there'll be a shift in fashion, you know, if the needs and wants of people will shift. And that also could be because I think a lot of people who have been working from home like the flexibility of not having to go to the office every day. And I wonder if that's going to remain a permanent thing for a lot of corporations. I wouldn't be surprised if there's more of a flex thing, and there may not be a demand for, you know, a professional wardrobe as we once knew it, you know.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to be a hybrid. I think what this is inviting for us is a hybrid between the two, because I really do feel like we need the connection. And it's been great, for example, to do a lot of things from home and be able to reach a far bigger audience because of Zoom, you know, because
Yeah.
of our technology. So you're familiar with the Enneagram. What are your thoughts on the Enneagram and creativity?
You know, I'm fascinated by the idea of the Enneagram. I became familiar with it a few years ago because a friend of mine had done the, you know, the testing on it and had a more comprehensive understanding than I did. And then she gave me as a gift to do the test online. And, you know, I mean, no surprise, most people already had assumed I was a 4. I wasn't. I had read the book, and there were certain elements I saw myself in different characters, and then when I did the test, I realized I was a 4 with a wing of 3, and I find it totally insightful. I wish that more, like, I think it should become like something that everybody should do, only because I think people would take things a lot less personally.
Yeah.
You know, if they had an understanding about the type of person that somebody else was, you know, and you would have a better understanding of how to relate to them, and uh, and realize that often, you know, their responses to things have nothing to do with you. It's just the nature of their personality. So I do. I'm not certain if I'm correct on the history on this, but from what I recall, it was originally developed by monks in the 15th century. Is that right?
Well, it goes way, way, way back to ancient Egypt. It's
Oh,
really,
okay.
really, really, really old. Yeah,
Oh,
really.
okay.
But
Well, maybe it was adopted by monks in the 15th century. I had read something about that, and I thought, you know, it seemed like a really practical thing, because if you have a lot of personalities living in one space together,
yes,
you know, you would be able to learn how to interact with each other better. I think college students should do it for dorms. It would be so much better.
it's true. It's true. So is there anything you want to add from our conversation on creativity? Anything that you really want people to know?
Well, I think creativity can be largely underappreciated. Like not just from an economic sense, but I think a lot of I think society in general sort of takes it for granted. And but having gone through a lockdown and having the elimination of performing arts, special events, actual in-person gatherings, being able to go to things like a museum or something, I wonder if people will have developed a greater appreciation for that in their lives.
Well, I certainly hope so. Can you imagine, Paul, a world without music, or a world with, like, I think of the amazing exhibit you did at the Glenbow Museum, like, and having access to these, to creative places and spaces. I do think our outer world really has a big impact on our inner creativity, and just inviting the arts and creativity in, I think is so important. And I do think your point about it being underappreciated and undervalued, I think that's so true. And in many ways, I think COVID has kind of illuminated how much we do need these sparks of light in our life.
It's true. Actually, if you'll indulge me, I'll share one story just to pay homage to you. because we should celebrate you too. But on the point of the museum exhibition, and when that was going on, and I had told you about how I had become aware, because not having kids of my own, I was not aware that field trips were not a mandatory thing, and that they were also not part of a public curriculum, and that students actually had to pay to do those sorts of things. And I had discovered that, underprivileged kids within our society here in Calgary couldn't afford to go to see an exhibition like mine, which was like just dumbfounding to me, because I thought, how can you imagine possibility for your life if you can't see beyond your immediate circumstances? And it's so important that in order to cast a vision for somebody, that they can see it for themselves. And so to that point, we were able to get them sponsored. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
And one of the things of your request in sponsoring the children to go to the museum was that they provide lunch for them, and because they often don't have lunch, that's where they get it at school. And so I had called River Cafe and asked them if they would prepare boxed lunches for because I thought, I would love for them to experience a meal from a fine restaurant, because they may never get that in their lifetime, And so they had prepared these little boxes, and the thing that was so remarkable to me, like Sal's team had made all of these like rainbow carrot sticks, and they were like holding up the carrot sticks going, these are carrots. Like they just had never seen a rainbow carrot before. And I thought, well, there in itself, the mission is accomplished in as simple as a carrot, that they will never forget that, And so that in turn, that whole experience in turn allowed me to join the board of the Glenbow Museum. And I'm a big advocate now for creating programming for underprivileged children to be able to, learn that history and education of not just the province, but other cultures and that sort of a thing. So thank you to you for recognizing the importance of that. It was impactful for sure.
Thanks, Paul. Now I see you're wearing your Awaken Project bracelet. That makes me so happy. It makes me so happy.
I am, and you gave me two. And I'm not wearing the other one right now because I was over at one of my interior design projects delivering something, and their dog jumped up and snagged it, and the beads flew everywhere. The string broke, so I have them all, and I'm planning on having it restrung back together. But yes, a claw was met with an unfortunate demise of my second one, but I cherish them. I don't even take them off. So yeah.
Awesome.